you're on both sides of the coin. You read tons, but you also contribute to the whole world's life.
Yeah,
you're right. It says you've been writing since you were a teenager.
Yeah, well, I started, age of 6. I still got the first story I ever banged out on our old Royal typewriter.
Really?
But seriously, writing started when I was about 13. My parents gave me an electric typewriter, thank goodness. Saved the carpal tunnel. And I've just been going at it since, yeah.
And that's just been your gift? Eh?
Well, I don't know if it's a gift. It's more of a neurosis. It's something I can't stop. Like, I become physically ill if I try to... I get very depressed if I'm not
Really?
writing. Yeah.
That's...
is
that a good thing? Is that
no, not necessarily. No? It's not useful. I wrote till I was about 40. And then decided if I'm going to spend this much time at it, I better justify it by selling some of this. So that I got published just before I turned 40. And I hadn't published anything before that.
Yeah, you know what? I've been a little bit out of touch. I mean, I mentioned for our listeners, I was in the same ward with you about 15 years ago. Yeah. And I didn't know. Yeah, I don't think at that time you didn't have anything out.
No, I think I was just starting.
You were just starting? See,
I just told you how old I am.
We had... I'm not that quick, so don't worry. At that time, I don't know. I didn't know, and I'm not sure if many people knew that you had written so much.
I think half the world still doesn't know that I write. Yeah, no, it's a hobby, and I'm glad that some of it got published just so I can justify, the expense. Because it is expensive to write, too. But I would still write even if nothing got published. It's just fun.
Just what comes out.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the writing process.
Okay.
Now, you come across to me, like so far, what we talked about, you are not a normal person.
Thank you.
You do things differently.
Yes, actually.
Do you write differently than most other authors?
And I wasn't really aware of it until I joined the Mississauga Writers Workshop years ago. I was with them about 3 years. And it's people that got together, I think once a month, and they would read each other's writing and critique each other, rip each other apart, and put each other back together again. So it was really useful. Made you brave about submitting stuff in front of people. But it wasn't until then that I started interacting with other writers that I realized I do have a different writing process. And I still don't quite understand how other people do it. To me, I'll describe what it's like. I'm not sure you'd like the image.
I'm interested. I'm totally fascinated.
One of the main differences, the other people come up with plots or characters, and then they play with them and they develop it or whatever, and then they put it in a setting and it becomes a story. They might outline it meticulously, think it all out before they write stuff. And sometimes they spend so much time thinking it out that they don't get to the writing part.
It's kind of like doing the blueprint first?
Doing your outline for your essay, but never actually getting to the essay.
Okay, yeah.
I do it the exact opposite. I'm drawn to settings. The thing that triggers a story in me is a setting. So I'll see a neat real estate ad, or I'll see a neat picture, or a neat, I look at this house. Okay, so for garden plot, I saw a real estate ad for a convent for sale, and I thought, I wish I could afford it. I can't do it, but my character could. So I got to invent somebody who's rich enough to buy a convent and make it into something. What would they make it into? And then, so I had the setting before I ever had the characters. So then, you put the characters into the setting and then kind of sit back and watch and see what they do. And the plot comes out of it. But to me, when I'm writing, it's more like I'm watching a movie and I'm just taking dictation. But I'm very much into the setting more than I am the actual people and plot.
Does that come out in the style? Like people, like the setting is a very important aspect of the story. Like that's a very important. You make sure that's very detailed.
In a couple of the stories, the setting's been important. Not so much. It's not like it's a great profound kind of setting. It's I saw a neat house I liked and I put somebody in it.
Is it just your process?
Yeah, but I don't outline things. I don't think out the plot. I don't know the ending until it ends.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm just as surprised as anybody else to find out who the murderer is, because I didn't know until it happened. In fact, I took one of the exercises our group had us do. I took the same characters, and it's a murder, but I had different character become the victim, different one be the murderer, and I rewrote it 3 times. So this is a full-length book. And
you wrote
a full-length book 3 times, same characters, same plot, but different role.
Wow.
And the third one turned out the best. It flowed the best, so that's the one I went with. But I didn't know who killed who and why or anything until it happened. And it was like, really?
Now, that sounds like a very interesting process. It sounds like a lot of work, though. Is that...
Well, no. I mean,
Not
for
for
me, pardon the image, but when I'm writing, it's like I have to just vomit it out, get it on paper, and I can write a book in a week. But then I got to clean it up afterwards.
Okay.
So there's a lot of rewriting.
Right,
And that might take a year or two. You know, that could take a long time. But the actual getting the plot out takes a few days. Yeah.
Is it always like that for you?
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'll
envious.
take a week off work and write a book.
I'm envious. Now I'm a writer too. I don't write words. I write music, right?
Well, there you go.
But to me, it's if I could spit out a song.
But does it come out to you full blown born, or is it a note at a time?
You know what? I struggle, and it takes me like 10 years to finish a song. Like that's the thing. And literally, I'm not joking. Some songs did take 10 years. But
they're probably a lot better than my books.
No, I don't think so. But the occasional, I'll have one of those songs that I can do in 5 minutes. And I'm like, wow, I didn't mean to do that, but it just came out and I love it.
Yeah.
And
those are the best ones.
Yeah. Now,
same with the writing. It's something that writes
like,
itself.
It seems like but you're saying that's like everything you write is kind of like that. It just comes out and...
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple of things I've struggled with, and actually they didn't end up getting published because they're, I can tell if something's good or not. Some of the things that got published, though, I was surprised. When you look at my first two books, I actually wrote The Ties That Bind first, sent it to the publisher. They wanted it, but they said it was a little unusual. It wasn't mainstream. They wanted me to get a readership first, then publish that one. Mm-hmm. So they said, give us something else. Well, I didn't have anything else. So I whipped out another book in like 2 weeks, Promise of Spring, sent it off to them. They published that one.
What?
And then they published Ties That Bind. But Promise of Spring, the one I whipped out in 2 weeks, is the one that's sold the best. But it flowed. It kind of wrote itself.
I don't know any other author like you. Like you don't like that book?
Weird.
Okay, I'll give you another book. And
they did it to me again last month. I sent them off a manuscript, and Covenant is my publisher, and they said they've decided not to do dramas right now. They want romance and historical fiction and suspense. And I had sent them a drama. And they said, okay, put it away for a year, submit it again in a year, give us something else by June. So I'm madly writing. I'm about 40,000 words into the next one, and as in the last couple of weeks, because it's due by June. I gotta get it out. Too. Yeah, and it'll get there. It'll be done. I haven't missed a deadline yet. Well, I've stretched a few deadlines. But
so, do you have a specific, okay, the analogy that I'm not a writer, but I'm trying to kind of think of it in terms that I can understand. I'm a songwriter, and I write different kinds of songs. Mm-hmm. But for me, a lot of the songs, and this is one of my frustrations when writing, I'll start working on a piece and I'll get into it and I'll be like, it sounds like all the other stuff that I've written. I can't write anything different. Do you run into that, or do you...
Well, it's funny because most writers do stick to one genre, mm-hmm. And they found a formula that works and they'll stick with it. They actually called me in to meet with the committee. Last time I was in Utah, the Covenant wanted to meet me because they couldn't believe that I had written this and that. Because they're such opposite things. I mean, the first was I had a romance. I like to tell people I started off writing romance, and now after 27 years of marriage, I write murder mysteries. But anyway, romance, historical fiction based on a true story, murder mystery, a biography, a western, and another mystery. And the one I'm doing now is historical fiction. So, I write all different kinds. I read all different kinds of things. Why would I write all different?
Do you have, do you sit down one day and just say, hey, I want to write a Western, and you just go and do it? Or, what makes you...
No, for the Western, actually, I was homesick for Utah.
Okay.
And I started writing a description of sagebrush, the way it smells, and the heat of the desert, and it just turned into a story. It just kind of took off. I had no idea where I was going.
An accidental story?
That one I started years ago. I wrote just a few pages and then I put it away in the filing cabinet. I do that a lot. I'll put stuff away in the filing cabinet, written on the backs of paper plates or, anything I've jotted down. And 6 years later, I'll pull it out and turn it into a story. I collect thoughts. I carry a notebook all the time, and I carry words around with me all the time that eventually will become stories. Desperate Measures came out of, there were two words I found, archaic words, teetotatiously expuncticated. And I loved that phrase. And I had no idea where to use it. And I carried it around for years. And finally, with Desperate Measures, I found a way to use it. And so the entire burning down of the cottage in the book came from those 2 words. I finally got to use them.
Now, wait, can you say...
And my editor actually let me keep those words. I was so thrilled.
Can you say those words again? I missed it.
Teetotatiously expuncticated.
Is that a real phrase?
Yes, that's real.
What
it means completely hashed, demolished, right? And it's funny because now I've met a couple of teenagers who've read the book who are using those words in high school. They're resurrecting those words.
Those are English words, right?
Yeah,
those are, wow.
From like the 1700s, but they've come back. I think I've resurrected them because
well, that's awesome.
I've heard a kid use them.
See, those are your linguistic roots coming. You're trying to restore a language.
But the entire plot, the whole way that book ended, the last half of the book, is because I wanted to use those 2 words.
So that's how that story began.
That's how that story began.
You got to think of a way to make these 2 words come back into our society's vocabulary.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah, it was just I liked those words. I wanted to use them, and they let me keep them. I was surprised the editor didn't take them out. She made me prove they were real words.
Does it bother you when editors get in there and change things?
It did at first. This is my creation, but really you give birth to it, but they dress it up, they name it, they send it out into the world. It's their money on the line. Mm-hmm. And you have to realize, and that's one thing that a lot of writers have a struggle with, is realizing you are putting out a product. If you're trying to publish, you are selling something, and somebody's investing in you. So it is their product. I mean, you'd have to... So after I finally figured that out, I've learned not to get too attached to words. They've taken out whole chapters. They've told me to put a whole chapters in. They rename every book. I never get to choose the name of the book.
Oh, really?
Yeah. One of them, the first one I wrote, they wanted it... I said it in Canada, and they said... No, because Canadian content doesn't sell.
Oh, come on!
Yeah, no, I've had that from a few publishers. So I said it in Texas, where I've never been.
Wow.
And it's old. But the second book I put, just a couple of chapters happened in Canada, and the third book happened entirely in Mississauga. And same with Desperate Measures, that was all in this. So I managed to squeeze Canadian content in.
See, that's good.
And they've gotten some feedback now from readers saying they find it interesting, Canadian content. So
and these are American readers giving you that feedback.
Yeah. So now I stick it in all over the place.
Yeah, they should have known that. Yes, yeah. Canadians are awesome.
I do find too, what you were reading earlier from my bio, letting my Mormon roots show through in the book. Now, obviously, because I write for Covenant, it's LDS fiction.
Yeah.
But I purposely try to write it in a way that you don't have to be Mormon to understand it. So, if I pick up Chaim Potok, I can understand it without having to be Jewish. Right. It teaches me about the culture. I understand that this is a different culture than mine, but it's accessible. I can understand it. And I try to do that with mine. And I would say 90% of my readers in Canada are not LDS.
Really? Yeah. So now do you find that, but after reading one of your books, they'll know a little bit more about LDS culture?
Yep. And they'll ask me if they have questions, but most people don't even have questions because I've made it simple enough.
Yeah.
That you're teaching them about eternal marriage or whatever, but in such a simple way that there's no question.
You kind of explain that in the story? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because that would be a hard thing. Like there's a lot of little nuances that only LDS would get, right?
I really stuffed them into the Desperate Measures, this last book. I overdid, purposely, tongue-in-cheek, making her like super Mormon. Super Relief Society woman, and she's knitting things for people and making casserole and she says it, she's saying what she did that morning, and in the space of an hour she did 18 things, and treats it like normal, and it's funny how many readers don't even pick up on that they think it's normal too.
Oh yeah. yeah. I guess
of course she gets up at 4 a.m. and makes cinnamon rolls.
Now, do you find that? I guess in recent years in the United States, it's been sort of the Mormon moment, right?
Yeah.
With Mitt Romney running for president, and with the church being in all the media
and the musical.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of questions about the musical.
Lots of publicity, and I don't know if any publicity. It's good publicity, but
well, that's what they say.
Did you find that in the last few years? Did your books pick up a little bit in sales?
No, it's been steady, same sales every time. Yeah, I think it's the same group of people in Utah buying my books. I don't think it's really spread much.
Oh, okay.
Well, Covenant doesn't spread outside of the U.S. much. If it's going to go in Canada, it's up to me.
Now, you mentioned that a lot of your Canadian readers are not Mormon.
Yeah.
Now, are those like certain books? Are like they'll kind of gravitate towards certain books, but other books they just sort of wouldn't be interested in because of the
well, you never
LDS
know what you're
content,
getting
or?
when you pick up mine, right? You don't know what kind of book I've written until you start reading it. Because, like I said, I don't stick to one genre. So, no, they just, they pick it up because, there's a picture of, a barn on the front, and it's Western. So.
It has nothing to do with the fact that, it's not an LDS book. It's not. They're not reading it because, hey, I want to learn about Mormons. It's more about, hey, this looks like an interesting book.
Yeah.
And, okay.
Yeah. At least from what they've told me. Now, I have had some interesting reactions, though, after people have read the book. I get a lot of questions, a lot of, so I assume this is what you mean, about, and then a lot of questions about how we view families or how, I actually had, after The Ties That Bind came out, a friend gave it to her husband to read. They're not LDS. He's from India. And the book, I don't know if you know about the book, but it's about abandonment, about children being left behind. And he had been left behind in India. He had been abandoned.
Okay.
So he read the book. He read it in one night. He actually showed up on my doorstep the next morning in tears to talk to me about the book because it really hit a note with him. So whether or not their intent is to pick up the Mormon doctrine, when they're reading the book, it does soak in a bit. There is some stuff in there that touches people. Probably more than I intended, I certainly didn't intend to drive somebody to tears, but it touched them in a way that I think a regular book off the shelf wouldn't have, because it does have the LDS doctrine in it. It's just, that wasn't really my intent.
That story was, it's about family history.
Yeah.
It had a lot of...
It's a family history mystery. It's based on my husband's family.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, his great-grandmother.
So it's based on a true story?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that a historical fiction, or
In fact,
that's an
I have
actual...
a picture of them on my wall right there. The couple right
Oh,
there
really?
with the two babies. That's
Were they, the names were...
them.
You
I changed the names.
Changed the names.
So
Okay.
that Grandma wouldn't come after me with a broom. I actually let the matriarch of the family read it before I published it, because I wanted to make sure I had changed enough that it wasn't going to offend anybody who was still alive.
Yeah.
Because it's a sensitive story. It's abuse and abandonment. So.
Yeah.
But that's them.
and the Ties That Bind. What an interesting title. Now, you didn't choose that title?
No. I chose Hearts of the Children, and the publisher told me you can't use the word hearts in any titles. It's overused.
Oh.
So they came up with the Ties That Bind, and there's 45 different books in the world named Ties That Bind. There was a movie on TV the other day called The Ties That Bind.
Oh,
so it's kind of, I always think of The Ties That Bind and gag, but it worked.
So that title, The Ties That Bind,
I did not like it
because of the people would think they fill in the blank and gag, or is that?
Well, that's a Norma Baumbach title, The Ties That Bind and Gag.
So if, in a Mormon, when I looked at that title, being a Mormon, I thought, oh, that's about family history, right? That has...
Yeah, and it works for that, in that purpose. But Covenant is focusing on an LDS audience. I'm not, quite frankly. I'm aiming at non-LDS audience. So
that's so interesting. Mm-hmm. So your target is non-LDS. However, your Mormonism influences.
If I can spread a little while I'm at it, then that's fine. But that isn't my purpose. I want to entertain. I mean, I know I'm not writing great high literature, and never will be super literature, and I'm not going to win, any Giller prizes over it. But it's entertaining. Hopefully, I do find I've gotten a lot of feedback. Elderly women seem to like my romance, especially because it's clean. Right? It's so hard to find clean stuff to read. I had submitted things to other publishers before I hooked up with Covenant, and I always got the same feedback of it's not racy enough. And it's like, well, you know what? My imagination only goes so far. I want to write something that my grandmother could read without blushing, So I went with Covenant, because they don't ask me to do anything I'm not comfortable with.
I wonder. I was just on a website, probably a month ago, and it was romance novels that were clean. You didn't have to worry about and I wonder if you're in there. You probably are.
Oh, I don't know. If not, I should be.
You should be. Yeah.
But I want to.
I think people are starting to. I mean, just Christians in general would they everyone loves a romance, but all the stuff you see in the
trust it.
Yeah.
Christian publishers would stay away from me though because I'm LDS. They don't consider us Christians, so they don't like to publish LDS stuff necessarily, even though the morals are the same, the values are the same. So
that puts you in a real tight niche, right? Like
it does. It means I'll never be rich, but yeah.
So but yeah, you do have your. It's fascinating. You do have you got your Utah audience, and you mentioned that you and I spoke earlier that you have many more sales in the U.S. than you do in Canada.
Yeah. Well, there's only one store in Canada that carries my books.
Which store is that?
The Cardston Bookshop.
Oh, in Alberta.
Yeah, they carry it.
That's the only one in Canada.
That's the only one that carries it. Oh. Because the return policy and stuff, getting stuff across the border is difficult. So you'd have to have a Canadian distributor here, and we don't. Covenant doesn't.
I see.
I'd have to be my own distributor, and I don't want to store 4,000 books in my basement. So
yeah.
So,
but in the U.S., it's sold in many more places, right?
Yeah, Walmart, Barnes and Noble, Siegel Books, Desert Book. Yeah, Amazon's got it. So.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that some have sold in Poland.
Meaning they're on shelves in Poland? Or
no, people have bought it.
Okay.
Yeah,
they order online.
If you can get it online, you can get it anywhere. But,
okay.
Yeah, little by little.
So I'm wondering, you have all these genres, and so how many? You name them all. Can you name them again? Just you got.
I don't know if I can. Promise of Spring, Ties That Bind. Those are both out of print now, but they're available on ebooks.
Those are
on Amazon for ebooks, but they're not available in hard copy.
And those are historical.
No, Promise of Spring. Oh, here's you testing my memory. Promise of Spring. That's the funny thing too. When I write something, once I turn it in and it's done, I'm on to the next thing. I've totally forgotten the book before, and I couldn't tell you the name of the person that I just wrote the book about.
So would people ask you, "Hey, so what were you know?"
Yeah, I can't remember the names of the characters, other than the one I'm writing right at the moment. Part of that's age, but part of that's just I'm so busy. It's out of my hands now, and I've galloped on to the next one. Okay, so I got Promise of Spring is a romance. I don't read romance. I can't believe I actually wrote. I'm embarrassed to say I wrote a romance. But it was fun. It was okay. But I threw a lot of gardening in that one, so it saved it. The Ties That Bind, which is based on my family.
What would you call it? Is that based on a true story genre, or is that like historical fiction? Or?
It's historical fiction based on a true story.
Okay.
But it's fictionalized. I took some liberties. But the general premise is true.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Next one was Garden Plot, which is a murder mystery that came out of a real estate ad.
And that's... there's a humor in there as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, there's humor in all of them. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I can't help that. You're not supposed to put murder and humor together, but I managed to. Then the next one actually would interest you, The Worth of a Soul. And that's the biography about Aisha Hitchens. And she's someone you should interview for this podcast thing because she's very interesting.
Now, I wanted to talk to you about that specifically, and I was saving that one for the end.
We'll come back to that.
So we'll come back to that one. That one's a fascinating story.
The next one was Beyond the White River, which is it's a romance, historical fiction / Western. It's 1870s Wyoming. Okay. It's a romance, but told from the guy's point of view.
Okay,
which is hard to find.
That's hard to find. You can have romance from a guy's point of view.
That's right.
That's very.
But you never see it. What was the next one? How many is that?
That's 5.
4, 5. Okay, so the next one was Desperate Measures. It takes place in Port Dover, Ontario, and it's a mystery.
Okay.
Yeah. And the characters were actually going to appear in the next book, which was called Sing Your Way Home, except that's the drama that they decided to wait, and they'll reevaluate it next year. If they decide not to use it next year, then I'm free to take it somewhere else. But okay. I'd like to see Covenant do it because it carries on the same characters, some of them. And then there's the one I'm writing now.
It's sort of a sequel, you're saying?
Well, it's a totally different story, but a couple of people pop their heads up in the book.
Little cameos?
So, somebody who's read the other one will giggle over the next one. So.
Okay.
And then I've got a children's book coming out, hopefully this fall or next year, that I wrote for my granddaughter.
Oh, beautiful.
And then the one I'm working on now, which is set in 1862, the Caribou Gold Rush out in BC. So. Okay. So I'm trying to put this all together. You've got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least 6 or 7 different. 6 on the shelf right now.
That's these are the ones that are published.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. And each one has its own genre, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Which is kind of like you said, that is a little bit bizarre.
But, a little schizophrenic.
But it has its advantages. I'm thinking like each book will have its own demographic. Like
Yes.
all your grandmothers
Yes,
will
for sure.
love this one, and all of your
Yeah.
teenagers would love that one, and
Yeah.
your children's book.
Frazzled Housewives will like Desperate Measures.
Yeah,
Yeah, children's book coming out. So yeah,
Is that a marketing ploy?
No,
or
it
is
wasn't
that...
on purpose at all. It wasn't on purpose at all. That's the way I write. I'm bored with this. It's the same way I read. I mean, I'll read, this for a while, and then I'll switch gears and read something totally different for a while, and then I'll read nonfiction for a while, and then I'll come back to... So I read everything. I just kind of start at one side of the library and work my way through, munch, and so I write the same way. It's just whatever happens, I was homesick, so I wrote a Western, I'm in the mood to kill somebody, so I do a murder mystery,
Wow.
It just depends.
Now, of the ones that are on the shelf here, this is the ones that have kind of risen to the top. Mm-hmm. How many are in your closet? And
last count about 65.
65. My goodness.
Now some of those are only like 40,000 words. They're not total, and you got to have at least like 75,000 words for a book. So some are in rough stages. Some I wrote when I was 13, and they're never going to see the light of day. Some could maybe get resurrected and cleaned up and rewritten. Like the one I'm writing now about the Caribou Gold Rush. That one I started 20 years ago, maybe.
Oh, yeah?
Wrote kind of a draft version of it. Decided it was silly, put it away. But now I can kind of see what I can do with it. So
is it one of those things that it's like a sore thumb? It's sticking out there. You've got to... You got to finish it?
As soon as it's out of sight, out of mind. I put stuff away in the filing cabinet, and 2 years later I pull it out and say, who wrote this? Did I write this?
So if you had lost that manuscript, you wouldn't have cared.
Well, I would have cared at some point, realizing it's gone, but I couldn't have recreated it, no.
Oh, okay.
In fact, I have lost, back when we had floppy disks, I somehow lost a floppy disk on the subway system in Toronto.
Oh, no.
That had probably 20 books on it. And it was gone.
20,
and I have not recreated any of them.
The only copy was on.
Yeah, that was stupid of me.
Oh my goodness!
But
They didn't have the cloud back then.
No. I don't laugh when I get to a certain point in a book and I'm worried about losing it. I'll start emailing it to my Hotmail, just to keep it. Yeah. There's a archive this one next, so I've always got somewhere else it's stored somewhere else, and then I print it out because I do my final proofreading. I find if it's on the screen and I'm scrolling, I miss stuff, and you have to really be meticulous. My goal is to try and have no typos, and I haven't done it yet. But so I will print it out and actually go through it with a red pen. I know that sounds archaic, but
no, that's the way to go.
Even when you're proofreading, you start at the bottom of the page and read backwards, so that you're not so caught up in the flow of the words that you miss the typos.
Yeah, and studies have shown that just reading a real piece of paper, you see,
and I can do it on the bus on the way to work. So it kills time.
Wow.
I put my commute to great advantage. I used to hate the commute 5 hours a day, but you know what? that's uninterrupted work time. Really.
5 hours a day?
Yeah, just about.
I thought my commute was bad. I'm about 3.
Well, it's probably 4.5.
I'm 3 hours a day, and I thought that was...
Yeah. But I'm on the bus and the subway. I don't have to pay attention to traffic, and that's my reading and writing and crocheting and sleeping, and I've actually threshed wheat on the Toronto subway.
So you've turned that curse into a blessing for yourself.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
It all comes back to that whole
Yeah,
managing your life.
Important to you. Yeah.
Exactly. That's incredible. Yeah. Well, I wanted to definitely talk to you about this book that I was very interested in, Worth of a Soul, and that's your nonfiction one.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, that's Aisha.
Now, for me, like I said, I don't read much, right? And I need to. But when I do read, and I don't mean this, I hope you're not offended, but
no.
if I have to, if I have to select something to read, it's going to be nonfiction.
Yes.
Because
Well, I usually do too.
I can't get it. Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, a lot.
Okay.
Yeah,
I can't get into fiction. That's just. I don't know.
That's totally fine. You don't have to.
And some of my
Make
best.
your calories count.
I guess so. But yeah, some of my best friends say, "Hey, you got to read this." I'm like, I can't read that. That's fiction.
Well, confession time. Anything on Oprah's list or any of these recommended, I hate all of them. I've tried a few, don't like them. And
because
anything that's popular, I don't seem to like. That's not my what I enjoy.
When you okay.
That's why I never join book clubs. They tell me what I have to read. I don't like any.
Now, for you to enjoy a book, is it
I'm sure it's a control issue.
Are you looking at like, hey, this is an excellent artist doing their, working their craft, and you look at how they put the words together, or you totally ignore that and you're just into the story? Like how?
Well, it depends how good the writer is, right? If I'm really aware of their style and stuff, then they're not a very good writer.
Oh, okay.
I need to be caught up in the story.
You want to get lost.
But there is, I'll have to say, some of my favorite writers, I am looking at, oh, what a neat image, or what a neat metaphor they used, or that does jump out at me. And there's some, I just sit and weep because I'll never be this good. I'll never be able to write this way. Alan Bradley. If you're going to read any fiction, read Alan Bradley, because the way he writes is just perfectly crafted. Every word is tight, and I'll never be able to do that myself. And so I admire the writing. But you get so caught up in the story that after a while you're into the story. You don't care. It's
sort of okay. So for that kind of thing, it's sort of the equivalent of a chef enjoying a wonderful meal.
Yes.
But
they should blend.
Yes.
The flavors should blend into one thing, so you just enjoy the whole experience and forget about each little spice that's used.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy.
with my at work they have music on. I'm in an office, right?
Yeah.
And office people like to have work, and I tell you, I can't listen.
Yeah.
I can bear it, but
Yeah.
they know that I don't like the music blaring, and they're like, "Why? You're a musician, Sam. How come you don't like?"
Yeah, because you're a musician.
And I'm like, it's not that they think I don't like music or something,
Yeah.
and I love music. The problem is, I sit there and I won't listen. I won't do my work. I'll be listening to the song. I'll listen to the chord progressions. I'll be listening to the good mastering job that sound technician did.
I know.
It's just
it ruins it for you.
I won't be able to work.
I'm kind of the same. I have to say, I'm like that when I watch movies. I like to watch movies, but I'm so busy thinking about the staging and the makeup and how they pulled this together, and why did the writer do that, and did the director really mean to do this, and why is the camera bouncing up and down, and so I miss the plot of the story because I'm so busy thinking about the camera angle that I don't enjoy the story all the time. It has to really grip me in order to get into a movie. Yeah. So it's the same.
So, okay, getting back to this Worth of a Soul.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, this is my favorite genre, nonfiction.
You can see I'm a little schizophrenic. I'm everywhere.
Tell me a little bit about Worth of a Soul.
Okay. Aisha Hitchens is in my ward. That's how I met her. She was teaching Relief Society, and she mentioned that she was on the team that translated the Book of Mormon into Turkish. And that piqued my interest. Okay, you're Turkish. Well, that's interesting. And then she mentioned that she was a convert from Islam. And I thought, okay, somebody's got to tell this story. So I caught her in the hall after the class and said, "Can I write your story?" And she said yes. And I couldn't believe she said yes. She let me pry for about 2 years. I would go to her house and sit with a laptop and just take dictation while she talked.
Oh, wow.
And just tried to capture every bit of every story I could. And it was all out of order, and it was all very jumbled and trying to figure out who was who. But I managed to catch a lot of it. And then came the process of, okay, sit down and put it into some kind of coherent story. And then I would go back to her with it and make sure, all the facts are right. And it was very grueling. With fiction, you can just make it up. It doesn't matter if you're right or wrong because it's fiction, right? You don't have to do a lot of research because it's fiction. But with her, I wanted to make sure I had it as accurate as I could. Mm-hmm. And to try and capture her voice instead of mine. Like I did, and if you read it, it really doesn't sound like my writing. It sounds like hers. There's a couple of scenes in there when she adopted her son that I had her write it, and people can't point out which part she wrote, which part I wrote.
That's pretty good.
Because it blended. It worked. I think I was blessed in doing that because there's no way I could have pulled that off.
So, okay, it's a biography? Or
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it a story like
I told it in first person as if I were Aisha. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you could be reading this, and if you didn't know it was nonfiction, you would think it was fiction? Or is it more like...
It's got enough history and stuff in it that you'd probably suspect this is somebody's biography. Yeah, you'd probably know that this is true. There's so much stuff that happened to her that it's stranger than fiction. Like, I don't think...
Okay.
I don't think it would have sold as fiction. She's had some really interesting experiences.
Okay, so it's not told in a plot. And
well, yeah, it is. It's told as a story.
It is. Okay.
Yeah, it's told as a story. And I tried to make it, flow like the same way I tell a story. But obviously some things, you're trying to recreate what happened 40 years ago in another language. And so I had to use some imagination on some of that. But and it's got photos in the back of the people she's talking about.
Was that...
Very interesting.
Was that really stepping out of your comfort zone?
Yeah, and hers. She read a rough draft of it, but she has not read the final book.
Oh, really?
It was. I mean, you imagine, a lot of painful things happened to her, and she was willing to sit and tell me about it and pull this all back out, and let me see it all and read her journals and delve into some painful things. And I hope I didn't damage her while I was doing it, because I put her through the ringer. I really delved. And it came out, and she was happy with how it went. I let her husband read it, make sure it was okay with him.
Yeah.
And her son read it. But she herself, I don't think, has read the final one. Because you lived through it a couple of times already. You don't need to live through it again.
Yeah.
It has a happy ending, but she went through a lot. Yeah.
It's a very remarkable story, though.
Yeah.
And
I'll never do a biography again.
Oh, no.
That was painful. It was emotionally tiring.
What has been the response to the book?
Amazing. Very good. Yeah. I've purposely kind of taken a step back and just let her do the radio talks and the firesides and the stuff about it. She's had a lot of firesides and things. I think they recorded one that they're going to publish.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
When you say they,
Covenant.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, that's incredible.
But she's had an amazing response. Hundreds of people that she's managed to reach. Not just, from the convert point of view, but some of the things, she's fought with depression and things. And so it's stuff that a lot of people can relate to, even if they can't relate to the immigrant part or the convert part. They can deal, she came from a very abusive home. And so...
Yeah, unfortunately,
it really touches a lot of people. And I've been to one of her firesides and watched how she talks. And she's just herself, but she's a court mediator, so she's very good at talking and relating with people. Mm-hmm. And just watching the effect on the audience. So the effect on me, and I knew the story, right? Yeah. But to hear her speak about it again really affected me. Yeah.
Yeah. When she does her firesides, are they mostly to LDS audiences?
Not entirely. Somewhat, but there's a lot of non-LDS that come, I'm sure.
Yeah. It's
from all over.
Fascinating story. Anytime you hear of...
if she does it again,
Yeah.
Yeah, but you for sure want to interview her. Mm-hmm. She's fun to listen to. She's a very dynamic person. Yeah. She's a very... she's one of these people that when she talks to you, you feel like she loves you. She's very warm and very, she looks you right in the eye and talks. Most people don't. And it's just an experience. She's an experience.
Was this a story that you had to sell really hard? Or was this one that it was just like automatically, you write that and we'll publish it?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Yeah,
as soon as I told my editor what I was thinking of doing, they're like, follow it up. And that's actually the one, when I was in Utah, I had just finished Garden Plot. Mm-hmm. And had given them the manuscript to Worth of a Soul. And they called me in to say they were accepting Worth of a Soul, but they wanted to meet me because they couldn't believe the same person wrote both of those. Because one is very light and, fluff and fun, and the other one is really quite a tearjerker, So they actually wanted to meet me before they said yes.
Make sure you're the same person,
yeah,
right?
But they told me in person that one was going to be published. And I was really happy for her because, her story... I think can help a lot of people, and that's why she agreed. And I think any money she gets from it, she gives away. Like, I don't think she's making money off of this. I think her focus is to help people, especially her own people back in Turkey. Yeah. So I think I think she's accomplishing that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, abuse is a far too common theme for a lot of people, and hopefully that helps people. And
Well, somehow I've got 2 books out about abuse, and I've got to lighten up and get to something else now, I think. But it's surprising that they let me dwell on those topics, because those used to be taboo topics. And a lot of times now you can, depending on how sensitively you deal with topics, just about anything's fair game with publishers.
For that book, or any of the other books that deal with that, do you use, you're a very funny person too, are you able to use any humor in those, or is it...
not in Aisha's, I didn't. I used hers. I used her humor. The other books, I throw myself in there. In fact, my family kind of has a running, activity they do after a new book comes out is trying to pinpoint all the Christianisms in it, because they know where they came from. They recognize, especially Desperate Measures seems to be my voice. That's me. So,
are your books...
it's not necessarily a good thing.
Are any or are all of your books autobiographical?
Well, everything you write is a little bit autobiographical.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't help that. It's, it's like leaving your fingerprints on the pen. You can't help but have some of it. Yeah. So there's a little bit of me in every one of those books.
Yeah. You mentioned your time where you're so busy, a number of years ago that. So that was probably Desperate Measures. Is that when you wrote that? Or
no, Desperate Measures was last year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That one, actually, that's about a frazzled mother of 8. So, yeah. But yeah, she's me.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I'll pick up funny little things. Just the other night at band practice, somebody told me about how their grandkid, they had to take him to the hospital because they had painted their eyelids with nail polish. And I asked him, can I use that? Like, that is just, I can totally get a story out of that. So I wrote it down, and I'll use it at some point.
Oh, boy.
Bring out the notebook. And...
You reminded me of something from my son when he was very young. He climbed everywhere, and he got up onto the top. I mean, we put our hazardous materials up high, right? Yeah. Well, he got up on top, and he crazy glued his eyelid shut. So...
Yeah, okay, we can use that too.
You can use that one if you want to, but it just reminded me of that. That's little.
I get a lot of inspiration from my children, which is funny because they don't read my books. I don't think they've read any of my books.
No, that's
and I keep warning them. Hey, I'm using you in the book. You better.
Is that why they don't read?
Yeah, but they haven't read it yet, so okay, they can't complain then. So I use them in the books.
Maybe one day when
I slip their names into my books.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. If you know their children's names.
Like their proper full names?
I use their names in their first names.
Are they extras in the movie, or are they...
No, they're main
They're
characters.
actual main characters?
Yeah.
Do they know that?
No.
They don't even know it? Okay.
I don't think they've read them.
You have to read it to find out, right?
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Well, Kristen McKendry, this has been a wonderful experience. There are so many aspects of you that are very interesting.
Thank you.
Before we end, could you just tell our listeners where to find you on the internet and where to buy your books?
Oh, okay. Now you're going to test my memory again. It's kristenmckendry.webs.com, and that will have links to all the books and a couple of the bookstores that carry them. You'll also find them on Amazon. There's also a link to my blog, which I keep. It's called My Daily Slog blog.
It's funny. I follow that. That's funny.
I have found that I actually enjoy writing that more than full-length books, just because... I live my life in 5-minute sections. If, I've got 5 minutes to get this done. I can do that with a blog. You can just whip it out, and then you've got this great feeling of accomplishment. I wrote something today, which 2 followers will follow. But there's a link to the blog on that, and then the books. Amazon in the States, it's Deseret Books, Siegel Books. Walmart in the Western U.S., Barnes and Noble. So,
okay.
And in Canada, it's ldsbookscanada.com.
ldsbookscanada.com, and they can get them from your website.
Yeah.
And I'll put a link on my blog as well.
Oh, thank you.
So that if you don't know where to go,
I actually linked you to my website.
Did you?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. So that's wonderful. Yeah. So this has been wonderful. Thank you very much, Kristen.
Thanks for inviting me.
This has been another episode of Interesting Canadian Mormons. To participate in the discussion for this episode, or to subscribe to the podcast, please visit us at interestingcanadianmormons.com. You can also find us on iTunes. Thanks for listening.